We had earlier noted that there are three descriptives that are found in the various text material regarding the Torah, and specifically regarding the mitzvah of Limud HaTorah. We have Yerusha, Mecher, and Matana. These terms, of course, are borrowed terms that primarily relate to the transfer of ownership from one entity to another, and we are now in the process of addressing the symbolism of these three terms as they apply to Mitzvat Limud HaTorah. The first term, Yerusha, points to a relationship for which the recipient does nothing other than the fact that he or she is born. That relationship, as we noted, could also develop through Giyur Kahalacha. We noted the Zoharic interpretation for this relationship, located in the term Yisrael, as an acrostic for the statement Yesh Shishim Ribu Otiyot B'la Torah. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah, and each individual is linked to one of those letters. Also mandated a responsibility insofar as the study of Torah that applies to all Jews at all stages of their life and under all conditions. We now come to the second descriptive, that Torah is linked to the concept of MECHIRA. And by way of introduction, we shall look at a Mishnah in the Pirkei Avot that records a statement attributed to Rabbi Yossi, a Tana, who made three statements. The first is that one should treat another person's wealth and possessions as if they were yours. The third, that whatever one does in his or her day-to-day living should be done l'shem shamayim, to facilitate the relationship that one has with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is the second statement that is most interesting, a statement addressing the issue of Limud Torah, that Hatkein atzmecha lilmod Torah. Hatkein with a shorish of Taf Kuf Nun, with multiple translations, generally linked to the concept of setting things up in a correct manner. In this context, to arrange or to prepare oneself, Hatkein atzmecha lilmod Torah, prepare oneself mentally, psychologically, physically, for the study of Torah. And Rabbi Yossi goes on to give us a reason for the need to Hatkein atzmecha, and that is She'ena Yerusha lach. Torah study is not a Yerusha, it is not an inheritance, it is not a given. In other words, one must work at it to be successful, which poses somewhat of a problem in that it conflicts with a clear statement made by Moshe Rabbeinu himself just before he died, that Torah tziva lanu Moshe, the Torah was commanded to us by Moshe Rabbeinu, and this Torah is a morasha, Kehilat Yaakov, an inheritance to the congregation of Yaakov. The conflict, according to the Rebbe, can be resolved by treating the Yerusha, Mecher, and Matana as descriptives of three different aspects of Limud HaTorah. The first, Yerusha, as we have discussed earlier, deals with the obligation for Limud HaTorah. This is an obligation that comes to one simply by the fact that the individual was born into the religion. The second, Mecher, relates to the obligation to understand, to the best of one's ability, the information that is contained in this broad-based document called Torah. And for this, we'll need to return to the term Mecher as used with respect to the transfer of ownership of items from one entity to another. Yerusha basically is the right of an individual to have access to the wealth of a parent following death. Technically, inheritance rights does not distinguish between age, between newborn and the very old, and all in between have rights to that wealth. It also does not distinguish between status nor between gender, although it should be pointed out that Torah law for inheritance is biased in favor of the male. Fortunately, in the Torah B'Al Peh process, these inequities have been resolved over time. MECHIRA, on the other hand, involves the active involvement of two parties, the owner and the recipient. In normal contractual situations, there is a relationship between the money handed over to the owner and the object, as for example, a house, that the recipient receives in return. More money brings a better quality home, less money produces a shack. The symbolism of Torah as a MECHIRA suggests a give and take. It involves effort on the part of the individual. The return is the knowledge that is gained from that effort. Torah as a MECHIRA is very much linked into the individual who is providing the effort in terms of the return that he or she shall receive. It depends on the learning skill, the mental capacity, the knowledge that one brings to the subject that is being studied. It also involves the amount of effort and commitment that the individual is willing to allocate to the study of Torah. As in the words of Rabbi Yossi, Hatkein atzmecha lilmod Torah. Exert yourself, prepare yourself for the study of Torah. The fact that Torah knowledge does not come automatically, that aspect of Torah is not a Yerusha, but needs work, is reflected in a statement in Masechet Megillah, attributed to Rabbi Yitzchak, who cautions us, Im Yomar Lecha Adam Yagati V'lo Matzati. If an individual comes to you and bemoans he or she tried, exerted themselves, but lo matzati, but were not successful, al ta'amin. Do not believe that individual. Conversely, if one is told that lo yagati umatzati, I was successful in my Torah study and I really didn't have to put in any effort, once again, al ta'amin. Do not believe that individual. But if somebody comes to you and tells you that yagati umatzati, I really put in the effort and I was successful in developing Torah knowledge, ta'amin. That person can be believed. Of course, this is broad generalization. Nowadays, we accept the fact that there is a broad range spectrum in the scale of learning capacity. The point of the Gemara is that Torah knowledge, or for that matter, any intellectual endeavor, requires effort. And on this basis, we can respond to the contradiction mentioned earlier that the terms Yerusha and Mecher, as applied to Torah, relate to two different aspects to the mitzvah of Talmud Torah.